Welcome to the Philanthropy Theater in downtown El Paso, Texas. This program was pre-recorded from the live webcast on October 15, 2013. TV production for this program was provided by Capstone Productions, Inc. and ephistory.com, the website for TV documentaries on DVD and information about our webcast and radio broadcasts about El Paso history and heritage. This program is streamed onto YouTube under a grant from Humanities Texas, the state affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. The program content is produced by the Tom Lee Institute and President Adair Margo, the Texas Trost Society and Director Malissa Arras, and the El Paso County Historical Commission. Bernie Sargent, Chairman. Thank you for watching.
Welcome, and thank you for coming to our panel discussion on preserving the architectural and cultural heritage of El Paso. My name is Malissa Arras. I'm the Director of Development for Adair Margo at the Tom Lee Institute and the founder of the Texas Trost Society. The Tom Lee Institute, the Texas Trost Society, and the El Paso County Historical Commission joined together to sponsor this event in honor of 3 demolished buildings right here in the downtown historical district and Archtober. Before we begin, I would like to note a couple of last-minute changes to our panel lineup. Brent Harris, president of Mills Plaza Properties, will be taking the place of Mr. Paul Foster, while Adair Margo, president of the Tom Lee Institute and cultural event planning extraordinaire, will be speaking on behalf of Mr. J.P. Bryan tonight. Mr. O'Brien apologizes for not being able to be here, but we encourage everyone to attend his lunchtime lecture at the El Paso Club tomorrow afternoon. A word of thanks to the Philanthropy Theater for donating the space tonight, as well as a big thanks to all of you for your very philanthropic donations that you're going to make, hopefully later, to the Texas Trost Society and the Tom Lee Institute, as well as your presence here tonight. Thank you to Max Grossman and Bernie Sargent for talking me through the history of downtown and walking me through the cast of characters relevant to its current condition. I'd also like to thank Jackson Polk with Capstone Productions for helping me get this conversation out live on the World Wide Web, which is it's streaming right now as we speak. I'd like to thank my mother, of course, who isn't here because she's moving my car, which was double parked behind a Honda Accord behind a Philanthropy Theater. So in any case, I'll thank her again later. One last big thank you to Adair Margo, who has helped me create a vision of what cultural enrichment could mean for El Paso. She has helped me understand that our heritage has a vast potential to root the pride of our city here, downtown, or within the artists and architects and all the other people who make up our cultural heritage. Let's see, where am I? It is our job to help new generations understand what our cultural heritage is, and it is our job to enliven it year after year. So it is something that they want to pass on to future generations. And so this brings me to what we're here to talk about, which is the preservation of our architectural heritage as well as our cultural heritage. Now, for those of you who don't know what cultural heritage means, I prepared a brief description. Cultural heritage is defined by the objects, buildings, traditions, songs, customs, and knowledge that are passed on throughout a community from one generation to the next, to give that community a sense of identity and continuity. Our 4 panelists will go through a brief description of some of the problems we've had in El Paso when trying to preserve our architectural heritage, what one solution to preserving a building looks like, what preservation and heritage tourism could mean for the future development in El Paso, and what it really takes to get there. While the first part of the panel will be presentations, the second part of the panel will be a discussion between the panelists and the audience, meaning you. So please, I encourage you to write down questions during the presentations, which you can ask. Were you all handed little pieces of paper and pencils? Oh, okay, good. Which you can ask during the Q&A. You can stand up and ask your question when you're called upon. I'll repeat your question into the microphone so that our audience at home can hear it. Or you can simply write down your question, and our screeners will pick that up, hand it to me, and I can ask it during the panel. All right, so getting started. Our first panelist is Dr. Max Grossman, an art history professor at the University of Texas at El Paso. Dr. Grossman received a BA at the University of California at Berkeley and a PhD in art history at Columbia University in New York, with a concentration in pre-modern architecture and urbanism. While Dr. Grossman has a long list of credentials in the fields of architectural history, most people in El Paso know him for his take-no-prisoners approach to addressing the city leaders and their decisions concerning the preservation of historic architectural edifices located within the downtown historic district. While one can say that he has made one or two people angry when addressing City Council on behalf of preserving landmark buildings such as the Union Bank and Trust or the Muir Building, he has also made many, many friends and alliances within the city. Far from being a rabble-rouser, Max can certainly be regarded as an activist and advocate for the preservation of the architectural patrimony of downtown El Paso. Please welcome Dr. Max Grossman.
Well, thank you very much, Melissa, for that very kind introduction, and thanks to Adair and the Tom Lee Institute and the Texas Trost Society, and to all of you who came here this evening. Have my video up there? Great. Okay, so I am vice chair of the El Paso County Historical Commission. Bernie Sargent is the chair of my commission, and of course we're concerned with all matters cultural as well as architectural, and we firmly believe that downtown, its architecture, can be developed in a way that makes cultural sense and not just economic sense. We are in favor, of course, of private property rights, the abilities the capacity of developers to freely pursue their economic interests, but we also believe that we have a problem. The problem is obvious to anybody who has spent time downtown, particularly in the last couple of years. I'm not from here. I've only been here for 4 years, but there are a number of issues that have caught my attention during my short time here in El Paso. I want to start by introducing you to our architectural heritage downtown here, and of course that's Henry C. Trost, the most iconic, the most important architect, not just in El Paso, but in West Texas and throughout much of the region. Briefly, born in Toledo in 1860, he really got his training in Chicago between 1888 and 1896, particularly during his tenure as a draftsman for Adler and Sullivan, which was one of the top architectural firms in the world in the late 19th century. And at the firm of Adler and Sullivan, there was another man working not far down the hall. His name was Frank Lloyd Wright. So we're talking about an architect who was in the midst of the most important and innovative experiments probably in the world at that time in the 1880s and 1890s. But it was in 1893 that Mr. Trost visited the Chicago World's Fair, one of the most famous of all World's Fairs, and there American architecture was showcased, including an exhibit called the California Pavilion. The California Pavilion was the first time in the history of the country that mission-style Southwest architecture had been showcased and elevated to the status of the other major architectural idioms in Europe and the United States. And Trost was fascinated. He became very interested in Southwest architecture. Ultimately, he ended up in Pueblo. Eventually, he moved to Tucson with members of his firm between 1899 and 1903. And following the lead of his brother Gustavus, he moved to El Paso in 1903, where he spent 30 years until his death in 1933. And of course, in El Paso, he constructed most of the great iconic buildings downtown. This was his masterpiece. This was going to be his legacy, the city of El Paso. Now, the list of his achievements here in town is really too long to relate. I mean, the man built well over 100 buildings, including most of the major structures here downtown. His career in El Paso coincides with the period of maximum prosperity in El Paso. Of course, the railroad had been completed in 1882, but between 1910 and 1930, El Paso was coming into its own as a major center of the mining industry, as a major center of garment manufacture, and as a major center of, for hospitality, right, for hotels and travelers. And of course, the Mexican Revolution is happening. Tens of thousands of people are coming across the border to make their fortunes here. Now, what few people realize about Henry Trost is that he was extremely eclectic, and his idea was to construct buildings downtown in pretty much every style in the American architectural idiom. So, for example, we have a very eclectic early 20th century building here that you all know, the Paso del Norte Hotel. But he could also, just as well, build Art Deco, such as this wonderful building, the Hilton, which eventually became the Plaza Motor Inn, or this Gothic Art Deco building, 1930, Bassett Tower. You all know, of course, the Anson Mills building, so ably restored by Brent Harris and Paul Foster. Major contribution to the community and to the region. 1911, the first, well, one of the tallest reinforced concrete buildings on Earth. When it was finished, it was considered an innovative structure pretty much far and wide. Or the Union Bank building, which unfortunately we recently lost. The International Bank building next door, of course, burned down over the summer, and we were told that as a result of that fire, this building was structurally weakened and had to be taken down. This was, of course, built in the Ionic classical style and was fairly intact, less the two Ionic columns at the time of its demolition. But taking you to the main square, of course, we have the Cortez, 1922, one of the great hotels of the entire Southwest on the east side of San Jacinto Plaza, and catty corner on the south side of the square, the Robert Spanner Building, 1910. All of these buildings represent not just the architectural heritage of the city, but also its cultural heritage and its very history. All the major events in our city, some of the most important historical facts transpired inside these buildings, right? Especially during the period of the Mexican Revolution. They're so much intertwined, interwoven with our history that they've really become crucial. Now, what I'd like to do is talk about the John Muir Building, and I call this part of my talk Anatomy of a Demolition. And this might be a little bit uncomfortable, but I want to go through in a little bit of detail exactly how it is that we lose a historic building that is perfectly structurally sound, but maybe not economically viable. I have to be fair. Nevertheless, I want to go through a little bit how we actually lose a building. John Muir Building was here between the Cortez and the Robert Spanner Building at the southeast corner of San Jacinto Plaza. It was built in 1916 by our friend Henry C. Trost. It was designed to be the Security Bank and Trust building, but ended up becoming a commercial structure after 1920. Now, here's what it looked like originally. This is beyond most of our memory. This is what the structure looked like until about 1965. It was constructed in the classical revival style. It's made of reinforced concrete. Engineers might tell you that it was the first fireproof commercial building in West Texas. And so structurally, it was innovative, really a textbook building in a certain manner. But an ugly exterior veneer was applied around 1965. And partially as a result of that defacing, as well as some structural problems in our city code, we now have this. And we now know that this is going to be a parking lot. We don't know for how long, but we're told by the Downtown Management District for, quote unquote, a number of years, whatever that means, all right? Now, the Downtown Historic District. Many of you are aware that there is a Downtown Historic District. There are actually 13, I believe, historic districts in our city. The Downtown Historic District includes the lion's share of our wonderful historical patrimony. We have the John Muir Building here, which we just lost, and the Union Bank Building here, which we just lost. Each of these two buildings was located on the two most historic squares in town, San Jacinto Plaza and Pioneer Plaza, right, which can be traced back to the origins of our community. Now, the historic district consists of what are called contributing and non-contributing buildings. When the district was founded in 1992, people who are nameless and faceless, we're not certain who, actually assigned designations to these buildings, contributing and non-contributing, based on aesthetic criteria, cultural criteria. And some of these decisions, we all know at this point, were rather arbitrary. There we go. So, landmark is the highest status of building. Memorize that? Got it. Landmark is the highest status of building, right? These are buildings that have important historical overlays and enjoy a certain measure of protection. Then you have contributing properties, which are buildings that are supposed to contribute to the aesthetic quality of downtown. And then you have what are called non-contributing buildings, which we were told recently are quote-unquote throwaway buildings, or buildings that are not as important to the character of downtown. Now, this is unfortunate this happened, and again, we're not even certain who crafted these designations, but now decisions are being made about demolition based on these 1992 designations, and so we're starting to lose non-contributing buildings. Now, I'm just showing you a map that I made, which shows you some of the more important non-contributing buildings, including the John Muir building, which is a Trost building on the main square, and the Union Bank building, another important early 20th century Henry C. Trost building. But there are other properties, including, by the way, San Jacinto Plaza, which enjoys the same legal measure of protection. I know it's public property, but it has the same legal measure of protection as the other non-contributing buildings. And if that doesn't worry you, any of you, think about, was it in Phoenix, Arizona? In Phoenix, Arizona, where the main historical square was actually built upon by developers, because that too was considered a non-contributing property. And so there really isn't much protection for that iconic space. Now, the city has shown some concern. I'm showing you, for example, a list that was drawn up by the city of El Paso in April 2012, this is very recently, listing the 10 most endangered buildings in the city, including the John Muir building and the First National Bank building, which burned down. It's quite tragic that since this list was created, not even a year and a half ago, that we've already lost 2 of the 10 buildings on the list, and several others are still endangered. Here are the criteria that the city of El Paso lists with regard to buildings that they consider to be endangered, and the criteria make sense. There are 5 of them. I don't think any reasonable person would disagree with any of these criteria. And included are images of the John Muir building, current photographs, as well as historical images. Very few people know that the building was intended to be 14 stories tall. It was over-engineered. It was built to survive pretty much anything. Of course, only 3 stories were actually constructed. And the building, at the time it was demolished, had absolutely no structural issues that we're aware of, no differential settlement, no mold, no problems. It just had an ugly veneer on the exterior, nothing else. Here's the building under construction. This was built with such high standards, engineering-wise, that to demolish it was quite an enterprise. If any of you were watching the demolition, it was quite difficult to actually dismantle this structure, and very expensive because it was so well built. Now, moving forward. Very simplified organizational chart of the city with regard to architectural matters, right? Mayor and city council at the top. The city council, there are 8 of them, appoint 8 members of the Historic Landmark Commission. These are professionals who are responsible for making decisions about demolition and preservation and modification. Anything that has to do with historical architecture is in their purview. The Historic Preservation Officer, who's wonderful, very well trained, she does a great job, she also has review powers when it comes to demolition and modification. She reports to Matthew McElroy, the Director of City Development, who reports to Joyce Wilson, City Manager, who reports to City Council. There might be a couple of other strata of bureaucracy in there, but that's the basic structure, right? What happens is when a developer or a building owner wants to, say, demolish a building, that request is placed before the Historic Landmark Commission. Both sides get to argue for or against demolition, and then let's just say that HLC rules against demolition. In the case of John Muir, 8-0, unanimously denying the demolition permit. These are professionals, all 8 of them appointed by City Council. But then the developer has the right of appeal. The appeal goes back to City Council, And the staff of the Historic Preservation Office and City Development can weigh in on that appeal and make a recommendation. Under Matthew McElroy's leadership, the recommendation was for demolition, okay? The case was argued before City Council, and then the City Council votes unanimously to overrule the HLC. Building goes down. That decision was made November 13th of last year. I just want you to understand the structure of how things actually work, because most El Pasoans don't really understand the mechanics of demolition and modification. Now, this is the part that I don't really like, but again, I feel this is necessary. We live in a free country. We get to file open records requests and pull emails, which is part of our freedom, right? So I'm just showing you a couple of emails that detail, in this particular case, how things work. Borderplex, they've done wonderful things in this community. Don't agree with everything, but most of what they've done has been very beneficial to the community. I think we all agree. So I'm not passing any judgments. I'm just focusing on this particular case. So in July, this past summer, the attorney for Borderplex, David Bernard, contacts, possibly meets with, but certainly contacts by email, Matthew McElroy, and asks what's going on with the demolition request. We need to knock this building down. Borderplex doesn't own the building. The building is owned by another company, but Borderplex will purchase the building under the condition they can knock it down, okay? So that request is passed on to McElroy, who then responds and informs David that the decision is pending review by Providencia, who is the Historic Preservation Officer. Next step, 3 and 4. Borderplex attorney, I haven't heard anything, Mr. McElroy, what's going on? And then McElroy orders Providencia Velasquez to stand for demolition. She's supposed to be professionally independent. She's got a master's degree at Columbia University in historic preservation, but very clearly is being told exactly what to do. I know this is a little uncomfortable, but we're having a discussion here, right? Let's move forward. In October, the matter goes before the Historic Landmark Commission, which again votes 8-0 to deny demolition. And at that point, Mr. McElroy writes to Joyce Wilson and his assistant and basically says, well, you know, I'm sorry, these HLC people, they're so, what's the firm term? Preservation-minded. Okay? Is that a bad thing? I don't know. Just saying. This is objective material from the city of El Paso. Okay. Then finally, now that demolition's been unanimously denied, it goes before City Council. That's where me, Bernie, right, my committee, some members of the community, Margaret Smith, weigh in and try and convince City Council to save the building, right? These are shots from Borderplex's arguments during the City Council meeting. It's a non-contributing property, therefore it's not important. It'll cost much too much to restore, right? That's the cost of restoring the building, 4.73 million, as opposed to developing the property. It'll cost much less. And after all, the property itself is worth very little, right? And here's a rent projection. These are the numbers that were presented before City Council. As far as I know, I don't know whether these numbers were actually scrutinized. They were not made available to the public. We don't know the basis of the numbers, but there they are. They were briefly projected during City Council, and we were told it was much too expensive. All right? And these are the arguments that were made, and of course the staff, Mr. McElroy and his subordinates, were made to stand up and support demolition. But that begs the question, just down the street from the John Muir building stands the Buckler Block building, the old McCrory Pharmacy. Henry Trost, 1910. Very large building, much larger than the John Muir building. And yet, CVS Pharmacy found a way to profitably renovate it, kept the exterior, gutted the interior. There it is, before the renovation. And is that after? There it is, after. Beautifully done, right? Stand-up job. So apparently there is a profitable way to restore these structures. It's being done in every city across the country, including across Texas. And we wonder why it was so unprofitable to do this to the Muir building. There it is, in 1958, before the veneer was applied. And that is a diagram of the demolition, the building itself, as well as the two adjacent properties. Okay, now I was going to take some time and actually play a couple of video clips from the city council meeting that actually describe, in the words of Courtney Nyland and Steve Ortega, the reasons for supporting demolition, but I'm going to spare you that. Instead, I'm just going to summarize briefly. Representative Nyland argued, basically, in a nutshell, that the building is in very bad condition, can't be saved, too expensive to renovate. So echoing the arguments of Borderplex. Representative Ortega, these are shots from the meeting, spoke about taking Borderplex at their good word. You've done great things for the city. We don't know what you're going to build, but you're promising us it's going to be something important and that will contribute to our community. Therefore, we're going to take you at your good word. Your numbers look good. Question, what about the numbers? Can they be justified? Well, we're sure that whatever you're doing is going to be useful. Then there's the vote. Straight across, unanimous demolition. Then, ladies and gentlemen, shocker. During the summer, they start demolishing the building, and guess what? Hello? Underneath the veneer, the facade is perfectly intact, just as we knew. This is a wrecking ball job. If the veneer had been removed carefully and professionally, the facade would have looked gleaming new. We presented City Council with evidence that the facade was perfectly fine, that it was absolutely intact. But of course, we were completely ignored. We asked the City Council, why don't you do what the Buckler Block people did, CVS Pharmacy? Can't we have a strategy? Can't we have some leadership? No, the building has to go. It's too expensive to save, and so on and so forth. I think this shocked a lot of people. I think a lot of people were wondering, why do we have to lose this building? Is this really necessary? Just because it's there, we have to develop it just because? What is the reason for this? And as the building went down, its beauty became more and more apparent. The details of the interior, it was really heartbreaking to see this incredible loss. A Trost building standing between two Trost buildings inside the historic district and on San Jacinto Plaza. And there is our new parking lot. Now, as an epilogue, immediately after the destruction of this building, I'll conclude, we lost another one, the Union Bank building. Gorgeous, ionic facade, much of its detailing intact. In this case, the HLC perhaps felt a little bit less, what should I say, resistance to perhaps supporting demolition. And the vote was very close in favor of saving this building, only by one vote denying demolition. But it went forward anyway. And as Malissa Arras just told us, we have lost 3 buildings in the blink of an eye, not to mention the dozens of buildings that we've lost over the course of the past 30, 40 years. The question is, ladies and gentlemen, is it worth arresting this process? Is it worth saving what we have left? Can it be done in a way that's economically viable, that can satisfy developers, that can satisfy commerce? We think so. San Antonio, Santa Fe, other success stories are crying out to us. Heritage tourism is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Some states like Georgia and California have developed entire multi-hundred-million-dollar economies based on their downtowns. The Gas Lamp District in San Diego, all of downtown Santa Fe. This required leadership, guidance, sensible legislation. So I'm going to leave it at that. My job here is to present to you the problem. I'll leave it to my friends and colleagues to perhaps present possible solutions and to perhaps come up with some positive ideas. All of this, of course, is intended to lead us into discussion later. Thank you very much for indulging me.
I'm going to introduce our next presenter. Brent Harris is the president of Mills Plaza Properties, developer and owner of the Mills and Center buildings, the Plaza Hotel, and various other properties in downtown El Paso. He is also the managing partner of Plexar, owner of 400 acres of land in northwest El Paso, which are used to develop manufacturing and warehousing facilities, also under the ownership of Mr. Harris. Brent currently serves as the chairman of the governing board of Sierra Providence Health Network and is a board member of the El Paso Downtown Management District, MCA Tech Park, MCA Americas Realty, and the Wells Fargo Advisory Board. But what kind of impressed me is that I happen to know him as the man who worked for 3 years to restore the Mills building to the pristine and elegant state it is in now. And I also know him as the man who was described as showing off building details, such as original moldings of bats on the lobby ceiling, as a proud father brags about his children. And that was an article in the EP Times taken in 2010. So I'd like to give a very warm welcome to our next presenter, Brent Harris.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I apologize for Paul and not being able to make it. He had a schedule conflict, and unfortunately, he can't be here. These projects were kind of near and dear to me, and we bought the buildings mid-2000s. My grandfather, great-grandfather, actually used to work in the Mills building, and my uncle was the former Dean of Architecture at the University of Oregon, former Dean of Architecture at USC, and is now at the ripe age of 78, heading up the master's program in landscape architecture at USC. So it's got a lot of history with me, and this is near and dear to me. I wanted to start off, and I don't have, is this the... Which one? Ah, there we go. It's the bottom one. Okay. All right, I'm going to talk briefly. I'm going to give a real brief history on the Anson Mills building. Again, the Mills building, it stands on the original site of the 1832 Ponce de Leon Ranch. Anson Mills hired Henry C. Trost of the Trost & Trost architectural firm to design and construct the building. Trost was the area's foremost pioneer in the use of reinforced concrete, and at the time, this was the Mills building was the tallest monolithic concrete structure in the United States. At 145 feet, the Mills building was also the tallest structure in the city of El Paso. I'm going to... I'm just going to give you some pictures of the Mills building. This is the Mills building under construction in 1911. A close-up, as you can tell, OSHA was not a real big requirement back then. If you, I'm not speaking in the microphone, so if you can't hear me, please let me know. Okay. All right. I'm showing you this picture. This was a picture of a gentleman that was cleaning the window on the Mills building, and if you look, that's him right there. And again, he's just standing on a little platform 8 floors up. Kind of an interesting picture. These are several pictures that were taken from San Jacinto Plaza of the Mills building. They're on special occasions. It was Flag Day, and everybody flew flags outside their window. This is another picture of the Mills building, and as you can see, White House department store is on the 1st and 2nd floor of this building, and you can see a later picture of that. These were some of the Trost architectural features that you could see on the building. These pictures were taken before the renovation. Here are some of the bats that you can see, the U.S. mailbox. This is the original floor, and this is part of the stairwell going in. The original elevators. This was the glass that was right here. I'm not sure what's that called, but it was the glass above the retail. And so this is a picture of what the building looked like in 1911 when it was finishing construction. And when we purchased the building, this is what it looked like. It was renovated by the electric company, and they destroyed the architectural features of what Trost designed and covered it with a window wall. You can see the, you can see the canopy down here. Again, this whole window wall was put over the design. And in fact, when we purchased the building, you could actually get on the 10th floor and poke your head over and look all the way down to the basement. It was just a complete fire trap. Fire could have gone straight up the side of the building and hit every floor. So we decided we're going to go ahead and scaffold the building. We covered it up. We didn't cover it up to hide what we were doing, more from a safety standpoint. And so this is a picture of the building as we, sorry, can't see it. This is a picture of the building after we had gutted it, after we had removed all the windows, the original windows in the building, and we had painted the building. This again is a picture of what it once was in 1911, and this is a picture of what it looks like today. I just wanted to point out a couple things. This is the Hotel Sheldon, which I'll speak of in a minute, but you can see here there is they had the portico, and you can see all the windows. It's kind of getting distorted here, but the retail shops went in and out. When we purchased the building after it was renovated back then by the electric company, they destroyed the in and out facade of the retail shops and went with a straight window wall. And this is showing a completely renovated, where we actually took it back to the way it once was. We didn't put the light wells in, but this is to recreate what the look was back then. There was an alleyway, and in that alleyway we created a promenade. We added onto the building 40,000 square feet, and we're able to create a new promenade. This doesn't have any historic significance whatsoever. It's all brand new construction, but it's a promenade that goes from the garage out to Mill Street. And I'm glad to say that Adair has coordinated the marketing of several of the storefronts that are up and down the promenade, and beautiful. It's really beautiful what they've done. This is the lobby of the Mills building. And this picture right here, this is the bats as they've been restored. We actually had to hire a group out of San Antonio that came up and meticulously and carefully peeled away the 15 layers of paint that were on there to try and figure out what it once was. And as best we can tell, this is what it was supposed to look like, and you can see in the corner, that's what it looked like when we bought the building. Another picture of the stairwells. This was what it looked like when we purchased the building, and this is what the stairwells look like today. This is a picture of the Hotel St. Regis, which burnt down. We really liked the look of the Hotel St. Regis so much that we decided that when we recreated, we wanted to recreate that look, and we recreated it in the form of half of a building that houses a community foundation, and 4 floors above it are parking, which connects to an 850-car parking garage, high-rise, that is on the north side of Main Street. So you can see it's not quite a match, but we tried to get as close as we could. And this is the complex now as it looks today. You've got the Mills building, the St. Regis building, and this is our parking garage. I'm going to give you a little brief history of the center building. It was originally designed by Trost & Trost as a White House department store and as well a hotel structure, and it was built in 1911, 1912. The building has been called Sullivan-esque in that the designs were very typical of Louis Sullivan buildings. In 1912, the White House department store opened by leasing the basement, ground floor, and mezzanine. The 5 floors above the store were leased to the Hotel McCoy. And in 1917, the store expanded to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors, and in 1918, it expanded to the 6th floor. In 1927, when more space was needed, Trost & Trost designed the first 2 floors of the Mills building for them, and in 1985, Alum Properties purchased the buildings, combined them, and renovated, did a complete renovation back then, and in 2007, we purchased the building, and we did another complete renovation of the building. This is the building under construction. Oops, wrong one. And this is the outside of the Hotel McCoy. You can see on the 3rd floor there was a balcony, and there are people outside on the balcony. This is the building as it stands today, and just another angle. Beautiful architecture. If you haven't had a chance to go inside the center building, it's worth your while. There is no way in the world we could recreate this today. It just economically, it couldn't happen. Just beautiful, beautiful architecture. That's the. This is the 6th floor. This is the Hotel McCoy side, and then this was the department store side. And you can see the 2 buildings were combined. This is what it looked like when we bought it, and this is what it looks like today. As most of you know, or many of you know, we have the first Starbucks in downtown in the center building. We're very proud of that. And we recently opened Anson 11, which is a fine dining steakhouse. We have 2 stories in there. One on the 1st floor of the Mills building is the more bistro casual style dining. Upstairs we have several different areas upstairs. It's more of the fine white tablecloth dining. We have a garden area. We have a chef's table, and then just general dining with a piano, a piano bar upstairs. Really an interesting piano because I guess it connects to the internet, and you can connect it to, say, the New York Philharmonic, and it can be streaming live, and if they make a mistake, I'm told if they make a mistake on the piano in New York, the piano will play the same mistake here. But really, it's really going to be nice. We're hoping to open that by the end of this month. Next up is the Plaza Hotel. We purchased the Plaza Hotel from the Dipp family, and the Plaza Hotel was constructed on the site of the Sheldon Hotel, which burned down in 1929. The Sheldon served as the unofficial headquarters for many of the participants in the Mexican Revolution from both sides of the border. In the fall of 1929, Conrad Hilton began construction. 19 days later, the stock market crashed and the Great Depression began, yet construction continued. On November 30th of 1930, Hilton's first high-rise hotel opened. At 239 feet tall, it surpassed the Bassett Tower to become the tallest building in El Paso. Designed by Trost & Trost, it was an Art Deco style 19-story steel frame building with setbacks on the 16th and 17th floors. Beautiful building. When it opened in July of 1930, the new Hilton Hotel was touted as a virtual fairyland with exotic Spanish decorations, bellhops garbed in Spanish costumes, mazes of chrysanthemums, dahlias, and bluebonnets throughout the lobby. Elizabeth Taylor briefly lived in the penthouse of the hotel after she married Conrad's son, Nicky Hilton, and in 1980 it was listed on the National Register of Historic Places. This is the hotel as it looks today. This is a hotel when it was under construction, when it was the Hilton Hotel, and now it's the Plaza Motor Hotel. Absolutely iconic structure, beautiful structure. We don't have any immediate plans to build on this now, although we have been contacted by several hotel groups, some of them a 4-star group that we've had some very interesting conversations with, but we're not there from a rent standpoint, and we're certainly not there from a renovation cost standpoint. Very, very expensive to renovate. There are a lot of exciting things happening in downtown, as you all have read about and heard about. And with that, I'm done. Thank you very much.
I'd like to introduce our next presenter, Adair Margo. The president of the Tom Lee Institute. Adair Margo owned a gallery for 27 years. And, within that gallery, she came in contact with some of the best artists in the Southwest, including one Tom Lee. She started recording. She was a longtime family friend of Tom Lee, but she started recording Lee's oral history, and she actually co-edited Tom Lee, An Oral History, which became a book. Adair was chairman of the President's Committee on the Arts and Humanities during President George W. Bush's term, and this experience, in my opinion, continued to develop Adair's ability to connect to other institutions and to other people who have the same kind of passion and drive which are needed to bring arts and heritage in this city and in this region to life. So, a very warm welcome to Adair Margo.
I will take just a few minutes replacing J.P. Bryan, who I hope you will come see tomorrow. J.P. 30 years ago, he was driving through Marathon, Texas, and saw this wonderful structure. He didn't know who the architect was, and he just, on the spur of the moment, it had a for sale sign, and he walked in, and he ended up buying it for like $30,000. But if you all are aware, there are all these Trans-Pecos hotels now. There's the, in Van Horn, you've got the Capitan. In Alpine, you have the Holland. In Van Horn, in Marathon, you have the Gage, which JP will talk about tomorrow. And then in Marfa, you have the Paisano. And it's just enlivened. I mean, just the little town of Marathon. A few years ago, Jeannie Norris, I don't know if she's here, but I ran into her at the airport and told her J.P. Bryan was coming. She said, I want to do something to thank him for saving our town, for bringing that little town back to life, which it has. The Gage Hotel, in fact, we're leasing it. Our family is leasing. He bought another old house that he rebuilt. And we're going to go for Thanksgiving and stay in the Captain Shepherd's Hotel right beside the Gage Hotel for 3 days during Thanksgiving. But these pieces, as you have heard, are irreplaceable. They're irreplaceable, and I've thought so much about Tom Lee, who's so little known for what he accomplished. And I look at the 20th century. Of course, he was apart from the art world. He was much more, he always said, I was not concerned with the Tom Lee style. I was concerned with the style my subject demanded. You don't hear that much in the 20th century. It's about individual style. And Max mentioned that Frank Lloyd Wright, a man of great talent, and not to diminish it in any way, Tom Lee met him actually at Taliesin West up in Phoenix. But he made the comment, and I'll share it with you. He said, he was a man of great talent. He said, but in my eyes, he said, sometimes, he said, to me, it's the greatest demon who has great talent and thinks he's above the rest of the world. And Frank Lloyd Wright did pursue his own style. I think the only person to ever fire him was Stanley Marcus in Dallas, because he planned his home with no bedrooms, because it would interfere with the lines of his home. You pulled him down in Murphy beds. But Trost, I think very much like Tom Lee, and in the 20th century, really, I think primarily by New York, from New York, Max, you may, but you know, it's an individual style, you know, its own personal vision. And Trost found so much inspiration in the past and multiple styles that he used to satisfy his client or to satisfy what his subject demanded. What better style in a high-rise than like the Bassett Tower than Art Deco, those beautiful lines going up, or Chicago, which is much more Chicago style in the Mills building, but a great innovator at the same time. In using these styles, developing decorations and developing techniques of using materials like concrete, the tallest reinforced concrete building in the United States. I know at the time it was in my architecture book at Vanderbilt. So I'm so grateful to Paul and what's happened. You know, Brent, you know, he shows you the Mills building. How many of y'all been in it? How many of y'all seen? I mean, you walk in that promenade and you're inspired. What can happen? And I got so excited about it. They wanted to do murals in the lobby, but it was too expensive at the time. They were going to, you know, while the walls were white without tenants, and I wanted to volunteer to do the walls. And I went down to the library, and that's other treasures that we have are related. Our library has the drawings for these structures. There are all these Trost drawings. Inadequate. They're doing the best they can. I love the people there, but it's something that our community needs to rise up and help raise the resources to preserve and conserve all these things related to our architectural heritage. But I'm going to be part of the panel and let you all come hear JP tomorrow. I want to thank him. He's someone who's so passionate. He's put his money where his mouth is. He has spent 10 times his investment. I think he would do it again, but he is someone who said it's worth it because it's irreplaceable, and it's been over a long period of time. Thank you very much.
We've got 2 presentations left, and then I promise we're all going to get to talk. Our next presenter is Bernie Sargent. He's lived in El Paso for more than 25 years, and he's the chairman of the El Paso County Historical Commission. He was the one who gave me the idea for the event, basically, and he has been there and supported me many, many, many steps of the way. He's done research on historic districts, sites, people, and events throughout West Texas and Chihuahua. He's received awards for his dedication to the preservation and presentation of El Paso's heritage, and he serves on the Texas Mountain Trail Board of Directors, the El Paso Community College Tourism Advisory Board, the El Paso Convention and Visitors Bureau. The list goes on. Everybody, please welcome Bernie Sargent.
First of all, thank you everybody for being here this evening. This is a great turnout. I'm really impressed. And I hope you walk away with the enthusiasm that we came in with for the preservation of El Paso's heritage. You know, what I wanted to talk about tonight is, you know, a lot of folks, when they hear the passion that Max has and others of us have with regards to the demolition or the pending demolition of some of these buildings, we have to also educate them that we're not just interested in saving every building, because every building can't be saved. And we know every building shouldn't be saved. But there are a number of them that we have to reevaluate and relook at, and we're hoping the city's administration will weigh in on this and feel the same way that we do. So to that end, what I wanted to share with you is one of the reasons why we want to save a lot of these buildings, as everyone has alluded to this evening. Trost and Trost was very important to the community of El Paso in the Southwest. And it's something that I think if you're not an architect, you oftentimes go, well, we don't know who those folks are. Oh, I got to do one thing before I go on. Where's Margaret? We have the great niece of Henry Trost sitting here, coming in from Arizona to be with us this evening. Probably the only benefit she's seen from the demolition is she has to show up with a truck to take remnants of the buildings back with her to Arizona to share with the rest of the Trost family, but we're glad you came, thanks. The heritage side of tourism is very important, very near and dear to my heart, because there's so much of that heritage here in El Paso, and having lived here for a little over 25 years and traveled around the country and witnessed a lot of the similar motivations that El Paso currently has, it is something that I couldn't ignore, and I had to jump on and try to find a cast of characters that would help me out with it. So fortunately, Max came along and Melissa's come along, so now we have 3 generations, which is kind of nice, of people that are very interested in the heritage and the saving of these buildings. One of the areas that I wanted to share with you is if you look at the types of tourism that takes place in the Southwest all around the country, there are different classifications of tourism. The heritage tourist, heritage cultural tourist, is perhaps the second most popular today because of our generation, my generation, the baby boomers, who now are going out traveling, learning, trying to find things, trying to experience the rest of the world. You know, what can they learn by coming to El Paso? I know with one of the little groups I'm involved with, I often hear, where is old El Paso? Well, that's gone, but we still have the buildings that we can preserve here. And if you look at a heritage tourist, for instance, they will stay 2.5 days in a location to visit a heritage site like McGoffin Home or like our architecture downtown. And they will spend on average $27 a day more than any other tourist that travels around. These are factors that our leadership can't ignore because it's other people's money helping us. You know, we don't have the industry in this community that a lot of communities have to draw from on tax dollars. So we have to depend on either the citizens of El Paso or the visitors of El Paso. So one of our objectives is to promote that tourism and build that heritage tourism and make it something, make El Paso a place to go to, not through. And to that end, we have gotten very vocal, both with the CVB when I was on the board, which I'm not on the board right now, but I was, keep reminding them that we have all of these assets. You know, if you go back and look at an old El Paso Times newspaper back, I think it was 1887, 1889, oh no, it was early 1890s, one of the headlines was El Paso, gateway to Mexico. For many generations, we've been the gateway to everywhere else but El Paso. So it's our mission to try to change that thinking around, to make these people understand that, you know, while you're here, let's see what's going on. And as El Pasoans, we need to share those things with these people and let them know all the wonderful things that they could look at, what they could see, and what they could experience. To that end, one of the things that I put together a few years ago was I called the Greater El Paso Tourism Association, and proposed that to the city. They liked the idea, except they wanted me to do it, and in my free time, I really couldn't. But we're working to that end to where we could establish throughout the whole county a group of individuals like ourselves that are interested in the different types of tourism, the heritage culture, nature and ecotourism, culinary tourism, medical tourism, and sports tourism. And incidentally, sports tourism is at the bottom of the ladder when it comes to the amount of money and the amount of visitors that go to an area to experience an area. So what I love baseball. Whoops, did I say that? By the way, Brent, are you going to share with us what those eyes meant? No, okay. I tried to talk him into letting me use those eyes and put in my glasses here. What is heritage tourism? It's travel directed toward experiencing an area's unique heritage and culture. In 2005, heritage tourism was a $200 billion business in the United States. It has grown exponentially since then. It's right now rivaling or approaching a $300 billion business in the United States. And in Texas, we have approximately $95 million in additional spending that's done with the heritage tourism every year, and that's as of 2011. Unemployment continues to be fairly low compared to other parts of the world, other parts of the country, is because we do have the opportunity to share these kinds of things. Now with baseball coming on board and some of the other things that are going on downtown, I think we can increase even that level to higher than 16,000 in the West Texas region. Now the reason I mentioned the Texas Mountain Trail is because the Texas Historical Commission and the folks from the Texas Tourism Institute or Industry classify El Paso as part of Big Bend or the Texas Mountain Trail. And it's something that we are using as a tool, and a tool that everyone is embracing that is involved with it, to promote and cross-promote the locations, the sites that we have in our communities, so that when folks come to visit to the Big Bend, they know that there's more to see in El Paso if they just had a little bit further west. And again, to get people off the interstate to spend some of their hard-earned money sharing their time with us here in El Paso. I mentioned the hotel motel tax money in the city of El Paso. $5.5 million goes to MCAD, that's Museum, Culture, and Arts, as well as the Convention and Visitors Bureau on an annual basis. And it increases every year. It's very, very, it's a nice piece of money for them to use to promote El Paso. Now, as far as our own personal expenses go for the El Paso County Historical Commission, we receive a stipend of $20,000 a year from the county to do what we do to promote our heritage in El Paso County in far west Texas. And I think with the people like Max and Malissa on board with us, and I have press out here who's also on my County Historic Commission, we do an admirable job promoting it. And you'll see the likes of things like we have signs in the buses with the QR codes that will help people. You know, the folks with the smartphones, they can point their phone at that little QR code and it'll take them to that site, whether it's McGoffin Home, Weiler Tram, Franklin Mountains, any one of the very, very attractive assets that we have in the community. That's one of the little tools that we're using. We also are known as the marker guys and gals, in that we have placed well over 250 historical markers throughout the county of El Paso, and every year it increases. Admirable job. I'm very proud of the people that work with me on that, and it's something that we take great pride in. And if you'll notice, not only are we promoting the Texas Historical Commission markers, but we also have El Paso County markers. The unique thing about our county markers is we do them in English and in Spanish, as well as we have lithographs of the pictures of the person, place, or thing that we're talking about in that marker. So the person doesn't have to have a great degree of imagination to understand what that marker is all about. And ironically, the Henry Trost marker is right across the street from what used to be the Muir building. But the good news is they can still see the Mills building, and they can still see some of the other great buildings that remain downtown. Now, if you compare the regional budgets around the state of Texas, just to give you a little inkling of how much El Paso really leans on supporting what we're trying to accomplish, we being the CVB, the county, and so on. San Antonio spends $19.6 million a year in promotion. Fort Worth, $11 million. Albuquerque, $6.5 million. Oklahoma City, $5.5 million. El Paso, $3 million. So I think it's incumbent upon us to try to encourage El Paso to up the ante just a little bit so we can take advantage of these great tourists that are traveling around the countryside. Lots of stuff here. My slides. No está. Híjole. That's okay. Yeah, there's in fact, what I wanted to do is give Brad a little bit of extra time too. We've had people come to this meeting tonight. Brad is from the Texas Historical Commission. I've known him since I've been involved with it, and I've watched his growth within the Texas Historical Commission. He's done a wonderful job down there, helping us whenever we need help, and taking our information to the THC whenever he possibly can. One of the areas that I would like to ask folks, if they have any questions about restoration and renovation, is please present them to Brad when we're up at the panel, because I would like him to take that information back to the THC, kind of a reciprocity arrangement here. What we would like to do is have Brad tell them our concerns, and they can come back and maybe help us to streamline things, because I know when Brent was working on the Mills building, there were a few times when it was a little bit cumbersome, and we would like to try to help developers, architects, and so on who are here in the room that are interested in doing these kinds of things, make it easier for them, make it more palatable, so we don't have that excuse that, oh, I have to deal with the THC, I don't want to do that, they take too long. That's Austin. We don't want that excuse to be out there anymore. We want to be able to jump on board, help the folks out, make it as easy as possible to get from point A to point B, and then ultimately have a successful construction effort with the buildings that they're working on downtown and throughout all of El Paso. There's a lot of things going on, a lot of things in the future, and I'm just glad to be part of it. I'll turn it over to Brent now. Thank you. Not Brent. That guy.
I know this is running a little bit long, but we're going to contain it within 2 hours because that's all the time that we were given. It's our last panelist, and then we will turn it over to the audience to be able to ask questions. Bradford Patterson is the Director of Community Heritage Development at the Texas Historical Commission. He oversees Main Street, Certified Local Government, and Texas Heritage Trail programs. He has significant experience in historic preservation and architecture. He has a master's in architecture from UT Austin. He previously coordinated staff reviewing projects under federal and state laws, federal tax incentives, ADA compliance, and Texas Preservation Trust Fund grants. So like Bernie said, if you're looking to restore a building or if restoring a building is a pipe dream that might finally come true if you make the right move, come talk to this guy after the presentation. Thank you very much, and welcome, Brad Patterson.
Thank you. I will mention, I'm pretty sure Frank Lloyd Wright, or many clients of Frank Lloyd Wright, attempted to fire him. He had a tendency to just keep working, and he kept sending bills. So very few successfully fired him, but there were some differences of opinion on his work. I want to start by explaining how we view preservation. I would argue that historic preservation is not backward-looking, but is actually about the future. It's about quality of life. It's good for the environment, and it's good for the economy. Actually, it's great for the environment, and it's great for the economy. Historic preservation is the act of recognizing places from our past that are important to us, caring for those places by utilizing the most appropriate methods, and then continuing to use them, which is critical, continuing to use those places in ways that enrich our lives. Historic places are important because they represent our cultural and our architectural heritage. These special places help us establish a unique sense of community and instill pride and ownership. The protection of historic places has been shown time and time again in Texas and elsewhere to stabilize and often enhance local property values. Additionally, by utilizing historic places in vibrant and active ways, we encourage tourism and foster economic growth and development. Historic preservation, by its very nature, is environmentally sustainable. And I was going to cut some of this section in order to try to keep us within the time, but then Max starts with those slides of the demolition. And even if I wasn't a preservationist, it just disturbs me to the core in other ways. Back in 2005, the Brookings Institute projected that by 2030, America will have demolished and replaced 82 billion square feet, or 25% of our building stock, in just 25 years. Demolishing those buildings creates enough debris to fill 2,500 NFL-sized stadiums. Currently, construction debris accounts for 25% of the waste going into landfills. We're chopping up our heritage into little pieces and then making piles out of them. Recent analysis has found that demolishing one modest-sized historic home in Utah is equivalent to throwing away 12,338 gallons of gasoline. The impact on landfill of that one demolition is equal to the waste it would take one person 139 years to generate. Many of us know that buildings have embodied energy. There's energy used for materials, transportation, the actual construction of the building. In a sense, that energy must be recovered before a new construction can actually be considered to be a net energy saver. The newest energy efficient house can take 12 to 15 years to recover that embodied energy, while if you're demolishing an older structure before building that house, you essentially double that time period. For commercial buildings, the recovery period just from construction is 40 years, or 70 or 65 years if demolition is involved. For most buildings built today, the full recovery period exceeds the expected life of the building. So depending on building type, it takes from 10 to 80 years for a new building that is 30% more efficient than the average performing existing building to overcome the negative climate change impacts related to the construction process. Using life cycle analysis, building reuse almost always yields fewer environmental impacts than new construction of similar size and functionality. You may not know that a building constructed before 1920 consumes the same amount of energy per square foot as buildings constructed after the year 2000. So admittedly, we have a gap in that period from 1920 to 2000 when we're trying to mechanize all of our systems to keep us comfortable. And we do have energy efficiency problems in some of that period, but historic buildings are not necessarily energy inefficient. They were built and designed initially to be energy efficient in passive manner, such as natural ventilation, daylighting of interiors, and the thermal moderation that comes from materials like masonry. Those of us that care about preserving a built environment have been up against the all-American belief that new is better, cleaner, or more efficient. Yet the relatively simple step of adding a storm window to an original wood window has comparable performance and a much shorter 4-year payback when you compare that to the 34-year payback for a new replacement window. Windows are small scale, but the principles apply to a city scale as well. The EPA has found that the redevelopment of 1 acre of a brownfield site is equivalent to preserving 4.5 acres of open space. There's a monetary value to that space. Maryland has determined that preservation projects save 50 to 80% of infrastructure costs compared to new suburban development. So let's turn our attention to economics. In Texas, the last statewide economic impact study of preservation was in 1999. Although now dated, this study by Rutgers University found that preservation activities generated $1.4 billion of economic activity and 41,000 jobs annually. Study found that 11.1% of travel in Texas included a heritage tourism component. And that's actually considered to be a very conservative figure because it required explicit citation of visiting a historic site within the top 4 activities for that traveler, or they didn't count it. We'll come back to heritage tourism in a bit. Historic designation was also associated in that study with higher residential property values for all of the 9 Texas cities that were studied back then. In 7 of the 9 cities, the dollar value of historic designation was significant. The average property value increase ranged from 5% to 20% through the designation. Multiple interviews with both tax appraisers and tax assessors confirm that historic designation, especially on a district-wide basis, is often perceived as having a value-enhancing effect. The increase in value appears to be not as strong when you're looking at only designating an individual building or property because they don't have the protection from what else can help happen around them from adverse effects. So consequently, neighborhood rather than individual property designation may be the more influential in bolstering historic building sale prices. Many more recent studies have mirrored those impacts seen in Texas, and they attempt to mitigate for any factors outside of just the simple historic designation. In Philadelphia, houses in a National Register district command a premium of 14.3% over comparable properties not in the district. Meanwhile, houses in local protected historic district in Philadelphia command a 22.5% premium over undesignated property. So in many parts of the country, homeowners are desiring the protections and the designation because it has an economic value to them on the sale price of their property. A 2006 study in North Little Rock, Arkansas demonstrated that designated homes were worth an average of $31,000 more than a comparable home outside of the district. A study in Cleveland confirmed that low-interest loans given to historic properties for rehabilitation had a positive impact not just on the property receiving the loan, which you'd expect, but there was a catalytic effect on the adjacent properties and the surrounding neighborhood. And that didn't matter whether it was an urban area or a suburban area, and that's over 30 years of that Cleveland Restoration Society giving loans for rehabilitation. In Louisville, Kentucky, the properties in local historic districts were worth between $59,000 and $67,000 more than comparable properties not in historic districts. Between 2000 and 2007, those houses in the districts appreciated 21% more than the rest of the market. A 2012 study of 20 cities with significantly declining populations, mostly in the Northeast and Midwest, found that the existence of local historic districts provided some degree of stability in most of those cities experiencing population loss. 11 of the 17 studied cities showed the districts did better than the city as a whole, either losing less percentage population or even gaining population while the city had an overall decline. Let's take a moment to dispel some common misconceptions about historic designation. First, evidence shows that historic districts encompass a wide variety of incomes as well as racial and ethnic diversity. Historic districts do not just benefit the affluent. Although not always, in many cases, the population of historic districts turns out to be more economically and culturally diverse than the surrounding neighborhoods. The quality and relative value stability of homes in historic districts has been shown to reduce the likelihood of foreclosure. In good times, properties in most historic districts outperform the market, and in bad times and tough times, they decline and value is less than outside of the districts. The landmark commissions themselves get a bad rep sometimes, but they approve far more applications than they deny, and many requests are often approved at the staff level without formal hearings. There's good and bad about that. The overwhelming percentage of proposed changes to houses in historic districts are quickly approved. Commercial properties tend to be a little bit more complicated, time-consuming, and have some additional consultation compared to the residential components. The process of rehabilitation creates approximately 4.7 more local jobs than an equal amount of new construction. Numerous studies across the U.S. have shown that $1 million investment in historic rehabilitation yields markedly better effects on employment, income, gross state product, and taxes when compared to an equal investment of new construction or many other economic activities. For example, in Delaware, $1 million from manufacturing generates $344,000 in household income. New construction beats that with $477,000 in household income. But rehabilitation beats both of those with $540,000 of household income generated by that same $1 million. If we look at businesses, between 2004 and 2008 nationally, there were between 1.1 and 1.2 business openings for every business that closed. But Georgia studied their situation and saw that in that same period leading up to the recession, that in Georgia, main streets and what they call better hometown communities, which are historic towns, there was a 2.8 to 4.6 ratio of job openings to job closings. So in those historic communities in Georgia, far more businesses were opening than were closing compared to the statewide or national average at that time. So we'll talk about tourism for a minute and look at the impacts of travel and tourism for El Paso in 2012. Travel to El Paso resulted in $1.6 billion in spending. And I think this is, if I remember correctly, these are City of El Paso numbers. $348 million in earnings, direct employment for 12,000 people, $22.9 million in local tax revenue, and $75 million in state tax revenue, for which I greatly appreciate it because it keeps our doors open and keeps me employed. So I appreciate that part of it. Visitors to El Paso spent $175 million on accommodations, $221 million on dining, $84 million on the arts, entertainment, and recreation, $197 million in retail sales, which includes gasoline, and something you don't usually attribute to travelers, $52 million in groceries from travelers last year. Tourism studies are not always consistent on how they define tourists or market segments. Leisure travelers tend to be travelers who have taken at least one trip in the past 12 months for pleasure, vacation, or personal purposes within the U.S., and that was 50 miles or more from home. Cultural and or heritage travelers are leisure travelers who travel to experience the places, people, and activities and things that authentically represent the past and present, including cultural, historic, and natural resources. According to the U.S. Travel Association, 71% of the U.S. population, or 170 million people, travel for leisure. Mandela research determined that 76%, almost 8 out of 10 of those leisure travelers in 2013 participated in cultural and heritage activities. That equates to approximately 130 million travelers. Annually, $171 billion can be attributed to the 78% of those leisure travelers who are identified as cultural heritage tourists. Department of Commerce is a little more conservative. They did a 2011 study of cultural heritage travelers from overseas to the U.S. They found that 16.5 million overseas visitors could be classified as cultural heritage travelers. That does represent 59.5% of all overseas travelers to the U.S. in 2011. Of that 16.5 million, 69% of them visited historical places, 58% sightsee in cities, and 40% specifically visit cultural heritage sites. Tourism, speaking about Texas now, is a $65 billion industry with 220 million domestic visitors. 28% of Texas residents and 41% of non-residents participated in historic sites activities during their most recent trip. This ranks as the third and fourth most popular activity to travelers in Texas. Overall, 15.2% of the visitors to Texas in 2012 visited a specific historic site. 13 of the top Texas attractions visited by all travelers included a notable heritage tourism component. The Texas average per party trip spending was $768 in 2012. But for those parties traveling that visited historic sites, the average is $1,200. There's a $438 per trip difference between a heritage tourist and the average tourist in Texas. So heritage tourists are a large and very valuable market segment. If we look at inbound international travelers, the figure for heritage travel are even more significant. In 2011, 62 million international visitors came to the U.S. and spent around $153 billion on U.S. travel and tourism-related goods and services. These dollars are considered an export for the country, and so they impact our trade balance. It's dollars coming from outside the country into the U.S. A significant number of international travelers seek out nature and cultural-based experiences. 40% of the travelers to the U.S. from overseas visit historic sites. 21 million Canadian visitors. It just goes on, and I'm going to skip a few of the stats to get to some other things so we can have a discussion. Canadians come for our heritage sites. We see similar numbers when we look at the travelers from Mexico. It's a little bit lower compared to the Canadians. Why does this matter to downtown? There's significant untapped potential from heritage tourism, which is already a significant travel market. Our built environment, including downtowns and historic neighborhoods, are part of what draws visitors in search of authenticity. 63% of surveyed leisure travelers agreed that they, quote, seek travel experiences where the destination, its buildings, and surroundings have retained their historic character. 63% of leisure travelers are looking for what we're trying to protect as preservationists. 40% of those surveyed leisure travelers also said, quote, they would pay more for lodging that reflects the cultural and or heritage destination that they're visiting. Again, it's extremely important to those travelers, and that's a big part of why to protect those resources that you have in the community. So we know that travelers, heritage tourists, stay longer, they spend more money, they leave more in the local economy. There's real economic consequences for protecting the historic character and integrity of our communities. For overseas travelers visiting historic places, it was the third most cited activity. Travelers from Europe particularly, travelers from Germany, France, and Australia, interestingly enough, tend to visit historic sites and activities at twice the average of the international traveler from overseas. And overseas visitors to Texas leave $4,000 behind. When they come from Australia, they leave $8,000 behind. There's fewer of them making it from Australia, but that might be a market to really go after. I want to take what little time I have left talking specifically about tax credits that are available for rehabilitation of historic buildings downtown and elsewhere. A federal tax credit worth 20% of rehabilitation costs is available for income-producing properties or income-producing historic buildings. Begun in 1976, the program is administered jointly by the National Park Service, the IRS, and in Texas, the Texas Historical Commission. Every dollar of these credits leverages at least another 4 private dollars. Nationally, in 2012, these credits leveraged $5.3 billion in private investment. There were 1,020 projects underway, 6,700 housing units were rehabbed, 11,000 housing units were created, and 6,300 low and moderate income housing units were created. Each rehab created an average of 78 local jobs for a nationwide total of 57,783 jobs attributed to that tax credit program. Since '77, the critical program has resulted in 38,000, well, basically 39,000 rehabs, $66 billion in private investment, 500,000 housing units have been put back in service or been created, 124,000 low and moderate income housing units, 75% of all of the approved projects are in low or moderate income census tracts. And that, in addition to leveraging the private funds, the credits have had a net benefit to the U.S. Treasury, with $20.5 billion in historic tax credits, have generated $25.9 billion in federal tax receipts, not the overall economic activity, just the tax receipts. For the first 30 years of the federal historic tax credit, when adjusted for inflation, the cost of the federal treasury was $16.6 billion, but that amount generated 1.8 million jobs at a cost per job of $9,222. If you compare that to the recent federal stimulus, it's $445,000 a job for the federal stimulus and $9,000 for the tax credit program. I say that because that tax credit program is going to be challenged and is under threat when Congress finds their way to get around to tax reform in the very near future. The last thing I want to say is, I'll skip that, but to let you know that one of the reasons in Texas, we had last year 3 completed federal tax credit projects. Louisiana had, I think, 72. Massachusetts led, we had $38 million or so. Massachusetts had about $530 million. What's the difference? We haven't had a state tax credit. Most of the states, or the majority of the states, do have a state tax credit. They all work a little bit differently. The good news is that's changing for Texas. In 2013, the legislature passed a state rehabilitation tax credit. It's worth 25% of the historic rehabilitation costs. So, and almost everything on a project qualifies for that. It's similar requirements as the federal, except it's going to be against the franchise tax. It's easily transferable. It can be piggybacked with the federal tax. So if you do both of those, you conceivably could have 45% of the cost for a project be handled through tax credits. And with that kind of power, we can start to see making the difference, making those projects that aren't viable today viable tomorrow. There's more details on that. I'd be happy to answer questions or talk to people individually about that. But that, in other states, 10, 20, 30 times the activity that they had before that. So it's a gigantic opportunity for El Paso and for the state of Texas.
Okay, so the screen's going to come up, and then we're going to move the screens out of the way. We have a little bit more time to answer some questions. I know we have to be out around 7-ish, but if you do have questions, who has questions? Raise your hand. People do have questions. All right, if the panelists would want to come on stage and answer some questions, I understand that people have to get out of here. But you can either just get up and shout it at me, and then I'll repeat it into the microphone for the audience at home. By the way, thank you. One more round of applause for the panelists. That was fantastic. And I wish we had more time. Those facts and figures just blew my mind. Question. Who had a question? The lady in red. Just clearly state your name and your question. Mm-hmm.
Are there any financial help available for private school buildings that are trying to renovate their homes on their own? Is there anything available for them? It's not an income producing, it's not a private, it's actually an individual residential home.
Okay, so that was from Sonia, and the question was, is there any help? And I think that goes to Brad. Is there any help for residential? Oh, do we have mics on stage?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe. It doesn't. Okay. All right. Unfortunately, for private or for owners of a private residence, there isn't really anything at the federal or state level to be able to support that. There are some states that have a tax credit incentive program for owner-occupied residences, but the federal tax and the new state tax for Texas won't be able to accommodate that. They do accommodate rental residential, but they won't accommodate an owner-occupied. There hasn't been the political will for that. The things that do exist for that tend to be at the local level. Through the designation process, many communities have different kinds of incentives. Sometimes they're tied to investing in the property and freezing taxes and appraisal values for a certain period of time. Every city sets it up a little bit differently, and I'm not sure what El Paso's actually is. But the historic preservation officer for the city would be the person to be able to best answer the incentives locally.
Okay.
They tend to be minor in comparison to commercial property.
Next
She's in the
question.
room, by the way. She's right over there.
Oh, is Provi
Providencia
here?
Vasquez,
Raise your
there she
hand.
is. You could ask her directly.
Thank you for all you've done. Another question. We'll go.
If I could ask that when we're done, if you want to talk to Provi, she might be able to answer that question directly for you, okay?
Okay. I saw your hand shut.
Yeah, this question is for Mr. Harris. I wonder if you can talk from a developer's perspective, the considerations you make when you decide to restore or build new construction, and what might have been the justification behind the Muir building as to why it was more economical to demolish versus to restore.
Okay. And what was your name? So it's a comparison between, choosing to restore the Mills building versus choosing to destroy the Muir building.
Well, I really can only speak to the Mills building, and there wasn't really a choice of the demolish side of the equation. We look at the bones of a building, and the bones of the Mills building were structurally sound. It was it was a good building. I can't talk about the Muir building because I don't know about enough information about the Muir building, but you got to look at the economics of it. And some buildings, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but some buildings have good bones and can withstand a quality renovation, and some buildings just don't. They're old, and when you start digging in and you start finding what's beneath the skin, you might realize at the end of the day it's just not worth it. There's just not enough money out there and incentives to allow for renovation. It's cheaper to just demo and rebuild.
So structure is one of the more important considerations when you decide whether to restore or have you construct.
It's a big part of it. You got to have good, strong bones to build on. Again, one of the difficult parts is when you buy an existing building like the Mills building, there are a lot of hidden treasures that you don't know about, and they're game stoppers. In our situation, we were a little different because what we did was more philanthropic in nature. But for example, as we were expanding the Mills building, we started excavating in the back. We expanded 40,000 square feet up 12 stories. And as we were digging, we hit some metal. And as we started excavating around it, we discovered a 40-foot long, 8-foot wide heating oil tank. That was no one knew about. It was on no register, and it cost about $40,000 to have it excavated and disposed of properly. They're just things like that, and as you tear back the skin and you start realizing what's behind it, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not so good.
Well, Brent, that brings up a very interesting question, and this is something that's been thrown around a lot. A lot of developers want to say, well, I don't have millions of dollars to just renovate a building. So what do you say to, what is a counter argument to that? This could be answered by different members of the panel, but what is the counter argument to people who say, I'm not going to do it because I'm not Paul Foster or Brent Harris, and I don't have that kind of money, and I'd rather just demolish it and then find out that all those hidden treasures are still really there, and then everybody's going to be really disappointed, but it's gone anyway, forever.
Sell it to somebody who cares. There's a lot of factors that go into it. A real estate development is a complicated process when it's new construction, and it is definitely more complicated when it's existing building that you're trying to rehab. Most of the time a developer's looking for a rate of return, and they may get a higher rate of return on new construction. They have less unknowns. The ability to get financing may be easier on new construction because banks and lenders are worried about the same thing. Developers, in my experience or opinion, are very risk averse. It's a big commitment to plunk down on a building, and they're running the numbers to see what the rental income is going to be or what their sale price for the project afterwards or whatever it is. And they've got to look at the local real estate conditions. If you've got relatively low rents coming into a building, it's very difficult to get a developer to invest in that property because they're not going to get the return from those rental rates. Likewise, you could have situations, and I don't know, I guess some of this may be what you're seeing in parts of downtown. You have a significant amount of economic activity being generated, from what I can see, almost as a wholesale business for Mexico on some of the streets between here and the border. And there's some great historic buildings in there that are in very poor condition. But the economic activity is happening. It's generating income. I don't have any idea what the rents are it's generating. But if I'm an owner of that building, I look at it and say, well, I'm either making money or I'm essentially making money regardless of how much it is, and I may not be having to invest very much in this building. Why are you going to convince me to invest more money in it? I'm already getting a return that I'm comfortable with.
Anybody else want to comment on that? Because this is the problem, I feel like, a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's been an argument we've heard. I know Max and I have had meetings with a number of developers, not of the caliber of Brent and Paul, but the folks will always use the argument that, Paul can afford to throw money away. Paul didn't become successful throwing money away. And, that argument to me falls on deaf ears when they say things like that. Look at the building, like Brad said, if you don't want to spend the money on it, sell it to somebody who will.
I think it's it's sort of an attitude too. I remember with the ADA, everybody says it's too expensive, we can't do it. And then it became part of the culture, and it's something you just had to do, and it's not that you can do it all the time, but I think what we want is like to know what we have, to know what's there and who these people are, to know what our treasures are, and so that there's a certain attitude that you don't just get rid of things, that there's a plan and there's a reason, and it's explained and you understand it. And I think that's what Max is trying to get at, aren't you?
Yeah, and if I may, why do we go to Mesilla? Why go there? Because it's beautiful, and it's mysterious, and it's interesting, and you get a sense that people there have real pride in their built environment. Look at the other extreme, Las Cruces, which is a 400-year-old city. And about 30, 40 years ago, the city government sold them on demolishing completely, razing to the ground their historical center for development. And it was going to be an economic boom. Never happened. And they've completely wiped out their history and their architecture. It will never come back, okay? You're going to go to Mesilla before you go to Las Cruces to go out to dinner or to take your family for a Sunday outing, aren't you, right? Now, here in El Paso, we're at a crossroads. Do we want to be like Mesilla, or do we want to be like Las Cruces? And we're at a point now where we have to make a decision, and it's going to be, are we going to develop a common pride in our architectural heritage? Are we going to elect city leaders who agree with us? Are we going to have some guidance that's going to take us in the direction of heritage tourism? Or are we just going to let the entire thing fall apart and go the way of Las Cruces, New Mexico?
Okay, Max, I'm going to stop. In the back, pink shirt.
First of all, Max, your jacket is absolutely beautiful. I don't know what fabric that is.
Max, your jacket
Thanks.
is beautiful, in case anybody else didn't hear
La
that.
mia giacca italiana, mio amico. Grazie.
So, we're here talking about Trost treasures. The crest is one that's right on the plaza very intelligent people on the stage there. Amongst y'all, what do you think that the city and a public-private partnership can do to save it? We could just have a sort of open discussion on what can be done to save that building.
Okay, so the question is, how can we save the Crest building? Because it is in the hands of, it's privately owned, and there's no motivation to restore it, as we know.
Well, the owner's comment is he's preserving it by not doing anything.
Isn't that demolition by, what is it, demolition by?
Stupidity. Oh, I'm sorry.
Demolition by
neglect, that's
neglect.
the term.
That was what I was going for.
It's, it's interesting because that particular building is, he's been offered fairly decent amount of money several times by people that want to buy the building and take it back to the condition it was in when he bought it, because it was totally restored before he bought it. And he's allowed it to go to that condition since then. And, we just, yes, dear Lord, please help us on this one. So, and that's not the only building that he's got downtown. I mean, there's a handful of buildings and a handful of property owners. Pardon me?
What else does he have?
Capel's building.
Oh, yeah.
Abdu. Yeah. And there's a couple of developers that have quite a bit of property downtown that are just neglecting the obvious. How do we impress upon them to do that? Perhaps through ordinances. And I know that the city's looking at changing the ordinances to such a point where it will be incumbent upon these people to do something with the property.
Right.
Just keep our fingers crossed and hope it hurries up.
Well, I can tell you, we've on several occasions in the past tried to buy the building from Billy.
Oh, yeah, that's Billy Abraham.
Yeah, Billy Abraham owns the building, and he owns, him or an affiliate of his company or family owns probably 15 or 16 Trost buildings in downtown. We've tried buying it. We've tried buying the note. When we tried to buy the note, a family member paid it off, so he was behind on his payments. But as long as he is following the rules that are in existence today, and I know that's questionable, but as long as the city doesn't call him, he's going to continue to own it and just maintain it with as little effort as possible. It's a wonderful building. We'd love to own it. We've made several attempts again, but even though you change ordinances, there's a grandfathering that takes place, and there's just so much you can do, unfortunately.
Okay, we have time for a couple more questions. Well, did you want to? Okay. We have time for a couple more questions. I know you, ma'am, had your hand raised.
Yes, I'm also, I did my question, but I'm also concerned about the Bassett Tower. I'm concerned.
But there's good news about the Bassett Tower.
Good.
Isn't there?
It's a national building, and I'm a retired teacher from El Paso High. Max and I corresponded last May about El Paso High.
Oh, yeah.
I'm extremely worried about El Paso High, and EPISD doesn't know.
So that comment was about preservation of other buildings that are downtown. But luckily, Bassett Tower, which is beautiful, it's on Stanton Street, that is in good hands, we hear. So rest at ease. EPISD, well, there's a new superintendent. So
There's
maybe,
a new superintendent, so
Yeah, maybe we can work towards that.
I think.
So we need to have you set up a meeting with the new superintendent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But-
We'll be happy to go with you.
The short answer to your question and to Peter's question is that I'll tell you something. In my short time here, I've realized that the problem, I'm just going to say it, it's primarily political. It really is. El Pasoans overwhelmingly appreciate this architectural heritage. Look at Union Plaza. What was going on there 10 years ago? Not a whole lot. Now people go there because it's a little messy. It's interesting. It's generated a lot of money. It employs hundreds of people. We could replicate that downtown. We just need the leadership to do it, and we need to elect people who are going to make things happen and not wheel and deal in the background within the unelected bureaucratic hierarchy, which makes all the major decisions in El Paso.
Oh,
That's okay.
My name is Kathy Whittle. If anyone can support me for city council.
Kathy Whittle for City Council. What district? West Side. Kathy Whittle for City Council. Okay, we had two more questions, and I know that gentleman has been raising his hand. Yes, you. What was your question?
Hi, I'm Mark Callahan. I have a question for Bernie.
Mhm.
Has there been an attempt in El Paso here to develop a cultural heritage trust fund that can be replenished through developers being charged a certain percentage, say on a permit, or a permit that they will be issued by the city for development. A portion of that can go to this Cultural Heritage Trust Fund that would be used for historic preservation of these kinds of structures throughout El Paso.
Okay, well, the question was about, have we tried to develop a historic preservation trust fund?
To my knowledge, no, not yet. But that's an interesting idea, and if we could get our city leadership and perhaps the new city council member to be on board with that, that might be something to look at down the road. And we'll, I will take it to Mayor Leeser and talk with him about that too.
And the key would be to get the developers on board on that so that they will be charged a portion for every permit that they're issued that will go towards that trust fund.
I wish you hadn't said it with Brent up here.
Okay, it's now 7 o'clock, but I'm willing to take a few more questions.
Overtime.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Oscar Aguilar. I'm a cardiologist, so why am I doing here? It sounds to me very architectural, which is fine. I want to take the opportunity about this. I'm all for health, and the city of El Paso is the 7th fattest city in the United States. The number 1 city, the fattest city in the United States is McAllen, Texas, which is geographically, shares a lot with us. Houston is number 3, and we are about 36-37% obesity. The average is about 33.5 in the United States. So how can we marry the health initiative with the historic of El Paso? And I would propose that if we can do something around the city that'll make it easy to get around bicycles, walking, that'll make it more attractive for tourists, that'll bring money to the city, it'll make us healthier. Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, and those places have bike share programs. Chicago just recently got one. Beautiful stations downtown where people can move around. So we have an initiative, city council as well, and I'm just asking for their support. We're asking for the support of the panel and the people around here because it will make a lot of sense for you.
I know that a lot of the development, and I've heard from some people who work, for example, at MCAD. Hi, Casey.
Okay, I wanted to say, is
Hi, Casey.
Because
I
she
know that-
started a bike program.
Yeah,
riding downtown.
and also there's going to be a plan to have a walking path that goes from Union Plaza behind, I think it's the convention center,
between,
into San Jacinto Plaza. So to make that short, there are people working on that, but there are sort of outlets. Okay, last question, men in the glasses.
My name is Ben. And to piggyback on what Dr. Aguilar was saying, do we have any historic preservation walking tours?
Yes.
And if so, and it's at the CBD?
Yes.
Okay. So now we're going to get a bike share program here, and I know San Antonio and Fort Worth have bike share programs, and they have integrated it with their architecture tours. Can we do the same thing here, and perhaps have little maps that people can take to use on their bike shares and walk around and look at all the beautiful choice buildings?
Well, a couple of things. I know that MCAD, Ben's here, as well as Casey up there, and the CVB and the County Historic Commission and the Community Foundation have teamed up and put together walking tours, brochures. And what we've tried to do also is post those online so the social media fanatics can use it. For instance, if you go to one particular website that we've worked on, you can actually be driving or walking by that historic site or that designated location, and it will tell you through a very nice computer voice what you're looking at or driving by. So those things are starting to come up. We're racing headlong into the 20th century. Within the next 10 years, we might make the 21st. But there are things in play that are starting to help. I know with the bond program from last November, there's a lot of issues on there, a lot of opportunities for health-related assets for the community of El Paso, because we do need to look at that.
Yeah. Casey, meet Casey Darty. They're on the back row. Stand up and with the
Not to
Museum and
single you
Cultural
out,
Affairs.
Casey. I know you just wanted to come and enjoy yourself.
Yeah. Tell them about your bike program.
With arts, we've had a public art tour downtown, and I've cruised people around for that and had artists or curators come out. And we incorporated into last Thursdays into our artwork too, so.
And there
these
was an
last
80
Thursdays.
foot, oh, and if you didn't know, there was an 80-foot long bike snake skeleton.
Yeah, and
during
I
the
ju-
block. So
I just-
there's bikes in our city. In any case, I know that this is very interesting. The presenters are going to be available after the presentation, but we're going to have to wrap it up because I don't want the lights to be turned out on us. I would like to thank Brent Harris, Adair Margo, Dr. Max Grossman, Bernie Sargent, and Bradford Patterson for their really wonderful presentations and very informative conversations afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, and Ben, go Bears. Okay.
Go Bears.
Yeah, he's the other person in El Paso who worships the California Bears.
Max,
with me.
hold on. Can I really, just one second? Can I please thank the audience? Because tonight's success completely depended on you being here, and it depended on, your interest and need to make El Paso better and to take these conversations that you're having here tonight, that you are maybe going to have with the panelists afterwards, and go in the future, start conversations, start projects, talk, and maybe help us bring back downtown El Paso. So thank you again so much for tonight.
This program was pre-recorded from the live webcast, The Philanthropy Theater in downtown El Paso, Texas, on October 15, 2013. TV production for this program was provided by Capstone Productions, Inc. and EPHistory.com, the website for TV documentaries on DVD and information about our webcast and radio broadcasts about El Paso history and heritage. This program is streamed onto YouTube under a grant from Humanities Texas, the state affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. The program content is produced by the Tom Lee Institute and President Adair Margo, the Texas Trost Society, and Director Malissa Arras, and the El Paso County Historical Commission. Bernie Sargent, Chairman. Thank you for watching.